Aloha, namaste. This is Alexis Cox with Radha Home Yoga, and I'm here to bring you the full moon forecast. Our full moon is going to be Sunday night, so that'll be the time when the moon itself is brightest. The exact degrees of when the moon and the sun will be across from each other is going to be Monday morning. And since we have daylight savings time happening in places that recognize that Sunday, we will have it at 10:48 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. So we're moving from standard time to daylight time, at least I think for one more year. So the full moon is in sidereal Leo. And Leo is the lion, right? It's the king and the queen. And the part of Leo that it falls in is called Purva Falguni. And Purva Falguni is where we are taking a lot of enjoyment in our leadership, where there's a lot of pleasure and especially through the eyes, especially through the visual aspect, we feel, happy and pleasurable by seeing beautiful things and things that are likable. A lot of the Venus qualities we see in this particular star in Leo because it's ruled by Venus. It's right in the middle of Leo, and we've, somewhat recently discussed Magha, which is the one right before that, that calls upon the leadership and the lineage of the kings and the ancestors that come before one who rules. And in the case of our own specific person, this sign is really representative of our own higher self ruling. So the part of us that's connected to source, that's connected to God, that's connected to goddess, that's connected to whatever it is we name, that higher power. It's connected and it's coming through us. And the part of Leo that this full moon is in is really where we're sort of reveling in it. We're not as connected to the lineage and the history and the previous leaders before us. We're more connected to, that which makes it fun to be a king. The good food, the parties, the, people were attracted to the fun, the sexuality, the enjoyment. And it's problematic because obviously we see in leaders when they start to enjoy the fruits too much of being a leader, they lose some of their honesty, their integrity. They lose whatever, they were sort of promising to the people. They start to move away from, and they maybe make trades or deals or do things that compromise whatever it was that they, in our country run on, the platform that the president might run on gets compromised. In, true monarchy, they don't necessarily run, they're coming from a direct lineage, and they start to lose sight of what it was their predecessors were trying to uphold, and the integrity that they came in and the vision they came in with, and all the things that get offered them, and the underhanded backroom deals and this kind of stuff start to take over. So it's really where we have to be careful, and we have to be careful that our eyes don't see things as being beautiful and desirable, and that we go for that without thinking the rest of it through. We have to be careful about, being more concerned with things like popularity and attractiveness than truth and, facing the hard details and the hard facts. And in this case, our full moon's ruler, so the sun rules Leo, which is where we get that higher consciousness from. That is across the way. So it's in the opposite sign of Aquarius, where we're much more interested in the collective. We're much more interested in how we can help all of society, the structures and things that are broken that come from the past. So where the lineage can shine some light and help us carry forward good service in our leadership, Aquarius shows us the shadow of that and shows us how the old ways don't work and how we're needing new systems, new ways of doing things. And we need to think futuristically. And so this, having the ruler of the full moon be across the way in its opposite sign sort of gives a dark shadow on this sun. So we might be feeling in ourselves like, suddenly feeling in our power and feeling sort of, wow, I can do this, and look at me, I'm so great, I'm able to, attract people and magnetize people, or I'm maybe even feeling that ourselves towards certain things, feeling attracted and magnetized by the way they look, the glittery beauty of the crown and the throne and all the clothes and all the things and all the trappings. But then there's that, reality check from above that's like, is it, is what you're doing helping people? Is this going to further humanity as a whole, or is this sort of getting caught up in the, same old power keeps holding on to power thing? And, really making us question that. The thing is, Mercury has been joined the sun in Aquarius for a while now, and we have had it retrograde. So Mercury usually in Aquarius has a pretty good amount of intelligence. We're able to, be forward thinking. It's an air sign. It's in a friendly planetary combination. So Mercury, which is friends with Saturn, which is the ruler of Aquarius. So we see that there's camaraderie there, and there's a lot of intelligence operating. But when it's retrograde, that intelligence is sort of slowed down. All the possible forward movement we could make with our buddhi, with our discrimination and our intellect, is suddenly delayed, and things go wrong, or the computer doesn't send that thing off, or that doesn't, that email didn't go through, or whatever happens that sort of, stalls that brilliance that was coming forward from us. So it's frustrating. And the quality of Mercury being joined the sun is often one where we feel unheard, and we feel sort of like our ideas and what we're putting forth isn't being listened to by the king, the boss, our father, our, whatever's above us, whatever, the government, the, the ruling body or the ruling people aren't listening, and that's frustrating. And so that happens when the sun is really close to Mercury. Well, now there's a pretty good amount of distance because Mercury has gone backwards, not literally, but from our position on Earth, the slowed motion of Mercury has made it fall that many degrees behind where the sun is. And so we're now at a position where when Mercury goes forward again, which is incidentally happening later the same day of the full moon. So, like I said, Sunday night will be the brightest time of the moon, and then Sunday morning, 10:48 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, we're going to have the exact degrees of the sun and moon across from each other. Later that day, Mercury goes, stations first, so it sort of has to, it's like stopping, and then we'll start to speed up and move forward. So we have that intellect capable of starting to forward roll with whatever the thoughts are, whatever the different discernment has brought us to. Our ideas will start to flow out, things we've been working on the computer, or things we've written or tried to publish, or this kind of stuff will start to get out there a little bit more, and we'll see that forward motion. So we'll have a real opportunity to get our voice out there, which might not have been as possible the last few weeks. So that's super important, especially right now in the US. We have, of course, been dealing with this sort of primary season where we decide who the nominees are for various positions, and of course president is the one that people think about and care about the most. And on the Democratic side, there were lots and lots of different people vying for that position, and it just kind of keeps getting whittled down. So wherever you stand on that, or whether or not you're even engaged in that issue at all, it's a very good example of these themes playing out on a public stage. So hopefully you've got good things to say and you want to get them out there, and maybe more than just even on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. You can find mediums that can help get your ideas out there that might have a longer staying power and really true engagement, meaning not just people sort of quickly typing comments out of anger, fear, joy, whatever it is, the emotional drive that gets people to sort of comment on that social media. So that can be very powerful and hopefully help you sort of question that link between being a leader and being powerful in that role, and also making sure you're actually serving a cause and you're actually doing something that's good for the greater population and not just yourself. Which, is very tricky and very challenging. And it's even harder when you're talking about something like, with candidates, because so many of them lie and the news is really, quite skewed. So it's hard to really know the truth of that, the true answer behind that is challenging to tell, because part of politics is all this sort of backhand deals and exchanges and this kind of stuff that I was talking about. And it's it can be challenging to see through that and to really know what or who is actually standing for people, the people. And for some people it might be really obvious. So it's just, it's all a matter of your own capacity for discrimination that you natally carry, and also your own capacity for wisdom and truth in teachings, which you natally carry. And that's all stuff that's in your chart. So we also have Venus in Aries right now, and in the last video I did, I think Venus was in Pisces still, exalted. Now we have this sort of more selfish take on happiness, which is also not really, helping that Purva Falguni full moon, where we want pleasure to be immediate and, very much feeding our own passion, our own desire, our own fuel. And we will go out and get it, because Aries is a masculine sign. It's it's a beginning sign. It's a sign that starts things. But it's the bull, right? It doesn't really look around to see who it's hurting in the process. It's kind of just like, what I want, what I goal for is I'm going to get. And that obviously can affect others. So if you're in a romantic relationship, you might have noticed that causing issues in your partnership, in friendships and in your workspace and all these different places. That attitude of sort of, what I want is what I'm going to go get can be very challenging, because it's not as empathetic, and it's also not as capable of just noticing the wreckage that sometimes happens when someone rams through their way of doing things. And so that's, it is what it is, but can also help us really define our own needs in relationship. And if we maybe are prone to compromise a lot and prone to sort of, not holding our own and not going for what we want, it can be a really big boost in that direction, where we might actually, hold our own ground and fight for what we want more. And that can be a huge benefit to and boon to those who need it. We also have Jupiter and Mars about to shift signs. So right now, both of them are still in Sagittarius as of this full moon, but in the coming weeks, we're going to see them move into Capricorn and join Saturn. So Saturn's been in Capricorn since the end of January, and it's his own sign. So it's where we've been, really dealing with the hard knocks of life, the consequences, maybe physical pain in your body and your bones, maybe financial things you've had to really get stern with yourself or real with yourself about, long-term goals, really realizing the work involved and all of that. Well, Mars is going to be moving in on the 22nd of March. And we're going to see that Mars-Saturn collision that happens whenever those two planets come together. But in this case, we see that Saturn is in its own sign and Mars is actually exalted in Capricorn. So normally these two planets are very inimical to each other, and that's not really going to change. I mean, they're still inimical to each other, and it's still a challenge. We can think of Saturn as being the landlord of Capricorn. He's the one who owns the house, and he's, most people who come through feel that stern, watchful eye and are just like, ugh, will the landlord please leave and let me just do my own thing? Mars feels that more than anything with Saturn, because Mars is all about will and action and courage and blowing stuff up and, going forth regardless. What normally happens when we see Saturn and Mars come together is that we see this sort of flight, this really frozen energy of Saturn, of fear, coming together with a really angry, blow it up attitude from Mars, and the ice bursts when fire hits it. Like, it's this sort of cataclysmic reaction. And we've seen it over the past few years. In 2016, it happened in Scorpio, and it was very, very chaotic for a lot of people. We've seen it through drishti, through gaze. This last year with Saturn and Ketu, the South Node, joined in Sagittarius. We saw Mars go through various times when it was giving gaze. Now, Mars moves much quicker than Saturn. Saturn stays in a sign for 2.5 years. Mars moves at a much faster rate. Kind of turns out to be about 3 months that it's moving, but it really varies from sign to sign. So we don't usually see Mars holding court somewhere very long. In 2018, we did see Mars sitting in Capricorn for 6 months. Now, what we have here is two highly intelligent planets, but still that same sort of intensity of engagement. So we're still getting that fire from Mars, and we're still getting that fear from Saturn, but Saturn's fear in Capricorn is channeled. It's channeled through, okay, I don't have enough money. What do I need to do to get that money? I need a house, I need shelter, I need food, I need water, I need these different things. What do I need to get that? There's, coronavirus outbreak. What are the supplies I need? Like, it's a very practical placement for Saturn, and all that fear gets channeled into hard work and effort, and the humility to recognize that one needs help, and things like that. So we have a place for the fear to go. With Mars in Capricorn in its exalted state coming in, not as the landlord, not the owner, but as like the esteemed guest of the landlord. So most people want the landlord out of there because he's bothering them all the time, nitpicking and stuff on them. But when an exalted planet comes into a house, it's like you're going to, you're being celebrated as a celebrity, or as a super welcome guest coming in. It's like, you can have the best room in our house, you can eat whatever you want, here's our best bathrobe, and please enjoy yourself. So there's a different energy when an exalted planet moves into a house. There's still the fact that there's two people there, and they might not even get along that well. It might be a landlord of a house, but the esteemed guest just happens to be really famous and really well known, and they have to be really nice to them, but they don't actually like them that much. There's a lot of different, analogies I could use, but there's still going to be some tension because the two don't necessarily share space well. But you see this esteemed guest coming in who knows exactly also how to use this energy. All of that passion and anger and fire that can come out of Mars has a place to go in Capricorn. That long-term goal that Saturn has you, working towards, Mars is disciplined and is like, yes, there's something to do every day. I can do the same thing every day. Awesome. It's physical, even better. I'm going to be using my hands to do things back and forth and again, and it's going to be called productive, and it's going to go somewhere the best. That's exactly what Mars wants. So we see a lot of potential to put in some serious effort on our long-term goals, to maybe get over huge roadblocks or things that have been holding us back, where we know we have to do it, but there's fear there, or something about it is freezing us. We see ourselves just blowing through those frozen roadblocks. It depends on what house it's for you as to how that's going to look. If it's a house, like say you're a Taurus rising and it's your 9th house, you have a chance to really bust through things that have been holding you back in your teachings, or as a teacher, or something that is very truth-bound for you, something that has to do with the wisdom you're trying to bring to the world, and that you're also trying to learn and study yourself. But if you're a Gemini rising, one sign later, it's your 8th house. So you're seeing that it's going to be a bit more destructive and tumultuous, bringing up the sudden, the things we don't expect, and the facing of our deepest fears and things like that. And we do have Saturn in its own sign, so whatever house it is for you, you have that same ruler in there. So when you see something like, if it's the 8th house, if you are Gemini rising, then it's your 8th lord in the 8th, which is what we call Viparit Raja Yoga. You see that there's some blessing that comes from the two negative house lords interacting. So there's like something that kind of lifts you up out of the craziness when that happens. So even for those people where it's going to be a bit more chaotic or intense, it's still kind of a blessing, because whenever we see planets in good dignity, there's something good that's happening for all of us. It's operating intelligently. It might not look good. There's no way it looks like calm and peaceful and maybe what we want, which is usually comfort, ease, security, bliss. We want things to not feel uncomfortable. It will feel uncomfortable, but in the end, the result will be of benefit to your greater picture, your greater dharma, your greater truth that you're working towards. So that's really what we look at when we're looking with the when we're working with the Vedic sciences period. That's really what we're looking for. We're not looking for immediate pleasure. We're looking for long-term results. We're looking for moving closer to truth, and often that is painful. It's not a comfortable process to get closer to truth. It just really rarely is. So the other thing that's going to happen is Jupiter is going to join Mars and Saturn in Capricorn, and that's going to happen at the end of March, so March 29th, and we'll have another meetup by then for the new moon. But this is a particularly interesting scenario because Jupiter is debilitated in Capricorn. So the opposite of Mars experience. Mars is coming in, this exalted guest. Yes, we have, it's like the landlord is Saturn who just wants to get things done, right? His house is full of holes, the plumbing's not working, whatever. He's invited Mars in. Mars is like the expert construction worker, electrician, everything. He's going to fix this house up. He's going to use all his skills. He's going to use all his physical capacity and fix it up. And then, Jupiter comes in. And he's like the unwanted guest, the guest that is not welcome. He doesn't have the right skill set for what's happening here. What's happening here is practical action towards a long-term goal. And Jupiter comes in with big ideas and wanting to, I see that you're doing that with your sink, but have you thought about the meaning of life, And Saturn and Mars are like, no, we have not thought about the meaning of life. That's not what we're here for. We're here for work and effort and, physical activity and discipline and courage, and I don't know what you're doing, but you're messing that all up. So the constrictive energy, the practical, functional energy of Capricorn, and that really constricting energy where it's more of a downer than an expander, really squashes Jupiter's vibe. The vibe of being wise and expansive and open to great ideas and all of this kind of stuff starts to get squashed. And Jupiter has been in its own sign of Sagittarius, right, since November. And he'll go back there. He stays in a sign for a year. And this is just one of those things where he's moving into Capricorn and he's going to, make his way out. But we are going to spend the next few months with this alignment. And it's going to be, a time when we see people's beliefs, their ideals, that which inspires them, start to get really constricted and really safe and very, nuts and bolts and egged on by this sort of Saturn-Mars thing, at least for a little while. Saturn will be there the whole time, but Mars will not. But we will see that there's this kind of energy where we aren't able to have our true beliefs, our that passion inside of us that really sparks us when we really believe something is just going to be kind of on all edges, just getting shut down. And we can already see this happening, right? We can already see some of this starting to play out a little bit, because as the planets edge closer to these different degrees and stuff like that, we start to see these things happen. So you might have been really excited before the primary season, but I don't expect that that's going to be the way things continue. It's going to be much more of a downer, much more of a people telling you, no, that can never be, that's the Saturn voice, that can't be, that's impractical, you have to be, you have to be cautious and miserly and this way and that way, all this conservationist idea, and, we can't think big. And Mars is going to be totally unconcerned with thinking it's right or wrong, and fight for that, whatever it is. And if there's bad ideas, if there's bad wisdom, if our source of wisdom is suffering, as it will be, we will act on bad wisdom. And it'll be just really cutthroat, really harsh cut, this or that, this or that, this or that. So with Ketu still in Sagittarius, we can really see ourselves withdrawing from our belief systems that we just got back. It seems like it just happened in November that we started to feel that expansion and growth again, and now it's kind of a backward motion for us on this, and there's going to be, Jupiter's going to go retrograde, and we're going to start to feel ourselves really questioning everything we believe. So I expect that leading up to this, again, just in the U.S. election in November, there's going to be a lot of down before there's any up. There's going to be a lot of sort of feeling of suppression and oppression, which is really what Saturn feels like to us, because Saturn's a lot of pressure, and it's pressure that feels oppressive. It feels like we're moving away from joy and moving away from, again, expansion. It's that contraction, and you can feel it. And in many ways, Saturn represents death. I mean, it's time that ends, time that has a limited amount of time. And you're like, aware of that with Saturn energy. You're super aware of the limitations of time, and the ultimate limitation of time is your life. Your life will end, and Saturn is there to remind you of that. And so this feeling of Saturn is like, it's like moving away from life in a lot of ways, and it has this energy of just depletion. And really, in its highest state, what it does is help us move away from our attachments to everything, and it helps us let go. And that is why Saturn is the great meditator, because it's where we're able to actually release and surrender ourselves into that meditative state. Just like the super old people who are able to move past even being kind of crotchety and just don't care. They're just like, they have nothing left to prove in the world. They have nothing left to be very attached to, not even their own image or their own identity. Their children have probably even grown on, and there's not much left for them to be so clung to. So they're able to just be free. It's a freedom, but you have to get there to feel free. It feels like prison until the freedom comes. And that's really the energy of Saturn. And we're going to feel that affecting both Mars and Jupiter in the time to come. And I'll talk about that more in our next meetup, the next time we come together here. We do, for this full moon, have Jupiter still in Sagittarius in its own sign, reflecting that wisdom onto our moon in very close degrees. Jupiter's at 26 degrees, the full moon's at 25 degrees. So we do have a chance in this exact occasion to really light ourselves up with that wisdom that drives us and inspires us, and to make some steps forward in what it is we believe, and to really get our message out there. And that's a time, that's something we should really take advantage of now, and even in the next, the next week or two, as Mars moves into Capricorn, before the 29th, before the end of March, where we really get that, Jupiter moving in, and we start to feel a little deflated on the energy of our wisdom. And at that point, Mercury will also be moving into Pisces, where it's debilitated. So we're going to see that both our buddhi, both our intellect, our discrimination, and our wisdom, our sense of higher teachings, our beliefs, and our ideals will all be in debilitation. So it's going to be a less good time for those things to get out there. So really do what you can now. I hope this was helpful. As always, when you like, you comment, you share, you help out so much for me to continue sharing these teachings with you. And of course, if you are interested in finding out how these alignments affect you personally, you can go ahead and push the contact button for that and send me a note, and we can set up a reading. And also, if you have not yet signed up for my newsletter, go to my website and you'll get your free report on Saturn for all 12 signs. So it'll show you where Saturn in Capricorn is for you and what houses it's affecting for you. And of course, that will also help answer some questions about what's going to happen with Jupiter and Mars when they join the ranks. Have a blessed full moon. Namaste.